Hi guys, and welcome. This is going to be a bit of a breakdown of art styles and just taking a look at them and seeing what we can find and what's interesting about them, what you can learn. So you might just be a starting artist or just starting to learn to draw, or maybe you're a master and you just want to take a look at what someone else is doing and say like, ah, that's interesting, cool, thanks for your opinion, man, which is great. So everybody's welcome. Um, so let's look here at some Leonardo da Vinci. I won't go too much into crazy detail, but let's just simply break this down. Let's make it actually red so that we can see this. Uh, we can see some perspective. So he's using perspective that draws into the background, and we can actually see the horizon. We can see this horizon line is actually at the eye line, so that means the camera is at eye level. We are also sat down. Um, we can also see that there is a lot of symbolism here, where all these things are telling a story. So these people are arguing, for example, which represents discord. These people are observing. Something weird is happening here. like, like what's this guy doing? He's like feeling this girl up, and she's like, "Oh, I like it. That's cool." And over here, you have some other people with Discord. So he's obviously separating what is essentially an argument or people that have different opinions. And he's standing as this balance point between that. And you can see there's lots of examples of things going towards the center. Everything is pointing towards or leading towards. So for example, this hand here, he's looking away, but he's pointing towards this guy here. So for example, this shows the argument is probably about him. So everything is framing the central figure and kind of representing this figure as the most important part of the piece. And if you look, there's more shadows as you go out. But behind him, there's this light that contrasts his figure. So acting as a halo or whatnot, it is really trying to differentiate him from everybody else. There is separation and space between everyone, and now I've just completely like made it a red mess. But you can see there's those things working at play there. The table's done really well, um, and it's just a obviously a very historic and wonderful piece. Here we have Johannes Vermeer, and uh, we can just break this down really simple. It's not that complex. It's just so for example, we have the shadow side. So this shadow side here and this shadow side here. Also, the shadow side is consistent along the cloth. This was because he's taking it from reference, but as you can see, it traces down like a nice aesthetic uh, sort of triangle here that captures the planes of the face. So this is very three-dimensional because this is dropping back because the light is coming from here and it's hitting most brightly. You can see this specular highlight in the eyes here. And sorry, I just made that look absolutely hideous. So these specular highlights, and also here on the lips, the specular highlights are also coming here, bouncing off and coming towards the camera. Here, bouncing off, coming towards the camera. And everything is consistent here. He's reduced her from having any eyebrows. This is partly due to wanting to represent the the pastel sort of color of her face, and for this color to be contrasted both against the black and also the blue. So representing like these eyes are a little bit less blue than the scarf because he's really trying to bring out the skin tone. You have a complementary color scheme here, which is this yellow and sort of purple, blue. So while this is actually kind of a neutral color, it's maybe a little bit warm. This is a very cool color, while the lips are very warm. So it's creating a lot of warmth around her lips. It's creating a lot of cool up near her hair, and it's creating a kind of neutral tone, maybe a little bit warmer, down in her clothing. So this color composition is chosen specifically to kind of create and evoke those feelings. We also have something interesting here with the earring. So you'll notice this has a metallic sheen, while this is more matte. This is more like a fabric. So he's rendered this completely differently than this. He's also rendered the eyes differently than he's rendered the skin or the fabric. And so those differences in how he's rendering something has created a very realistic feeling where there's lots of contrasts, which is something that helps that really, really pop and makes it stand out and become really gorgeous. Rembrandt here. So Rembrandt here, he's got these kind of like smudged, blurred edges. There's little bits like this is kind of dirty, right? And he liked the idea of kind of like dirty color palettes that kind of mix things that aren't just pure and crisp, uh, because it creates a break in what is traditionally expected, where people might think, oh yeah, the only good artist, the only one worth watching, is someone who does it exactly as it appears. That's what art is. As photography would come in, obviously, doing something exactly the way that people expect it to be isn't going to be the purpose of art anymore. It's going to become redundant. So here you have this nice S curve, which is an interesting sort of rhythm that he's implementing, which also cuts across this S curve here. So he's creating this, and you can see there's kind of a curve that comes up here. So he's created a composition here that has dark and light. And that does look a lot like a yin yang, but I'm not saying he's creating a yin yang there. But he's also creating more balance on the light. At least here, there's more balance on the light, which is coming from outside. So this is a little bit of symbology here, where he's saying, everything could be dark, but light comes from the outside. And here in this dark, there is something dark. There is something dangerous. So sometimes light might come in life through a window that we can see through others when we're not meditating by ourselves, something we can observe. But at the same time, there might be a demon in the room with us that is competing of forces of light and dark, and he's meditating. And obviously, there's also another symbolism here of going up these stairs is going into the dark. So going up, trying to improve, trying to get better, takes you into the dark, to the unknown, where the demons get at you. While just looking outside, this is this is how you get away, or how you might you might find in life that the best way to get away from your demons is to stop trying to progress upwards and instead look outside. So it's trying to create an idea of a moment, and there's storytelling in this piece that you can find if you're really looking for it, which is super interesting. Here, Claude Monet. I love Monet. He's one of my favorite artists, um, and not just because he's famous. I'm just like, what are you doing here? This is amazing. So along here, like even if it was a modern day, I'd just be like, yeah, like that's really cool what you did. So you can just see this is just brushwork, just some dabbing of brushes. It's not really that complex. He obviously has an understanding of reflection and how he wants to create reflections. So he's creating reflections in this water to create a different texture. So this, much like how the earring on Vermeer's piece was representing something kind of silvery reflective, this here is adding a contrast to the lily pads. So while these are very organic feeling, this is very reflective feeling. And so he's doing this a little bit here and a little bit here to actually kind of separate a person mentally into this framing, this zone, because this is the real focal point of the piece. You can see this here, along here, everything is pointing towards the focal point. It's creating a perspective. Even this on the trees, this is roughly pointing to it, this is roughly pointing to it. Even this is kind of roughly pointing to it. Um, this this is kind of pointing to it. These branches are pointing, and you can see that it's drawing you in. It's sucking you under this bridge and through and into this figure. And here, he's obviously gotten a smaller brush and he's putting a lot more detail, especially into this dark shadow shapes right in behind. Because that depth, this, what would you call it? Ambient occlusion. This ambient occlusion, this darkness, contrasts very strongly against the light that is in this section. I know I've just created like way too many things. Okay. So he's created this ambient occlusion, this contrast of this little bit darker area and this lighter area. And you can see there's a 1/3 ratio here and there's a 2/3 ratio here for that light. And then here he's separated it. He's separated it with this different material. He's separated it with a different material there with the bridge. And so he's created this very strong framing structure here where everything outside of that becomes progressively more abstract because he wants you to be drawn into the picture. And most people, they'll just be surprised, like, oh, all of a sudden my eyes are drawn here, which is really wonderful and a way of expressing and showing how vision actually works. And I try to explain vision as like three parts. So you have like the central focus point, you have the point at which you can see with two eyes, and then you have like your peripheral vision. So in this one here, let's look at this. Remove all these pieces. In here, this focal point is directly what you would see with your eyes. If you look at something, that's directly exactly what you see with your eyes. Um, Outside here, you're seeing this with two eyes, but it's not in your focal point. So you are going to see it with a degree of color, but it's a grade less color and variety and texture and understanding than you would have at the very center of your focus point. So for example, if you're doing perspective, there wouldn't be very much perspective change along here, but here there'd be more distortion. And out here, there'd be even more distortion. And so this being blurry matches up with how our vision works. And it starts to say to the audience, don't just look anywhere, you're looking here. So it's suggesting where you're looking, which is really interesting, and really cool. All right, we've got Van Gogh, super famous. Everyone knows why he's famous. It's just creates an amazing feeling. Like his Starry Nights, as well as the Scream, and whatnot. But here we can just see his real mastery of color. So um, purple and yellow are complementary colors. They're both neutral colors. So not necessarily warm or cool, though you'd say like yellow here is definitely warmer, especially that he's using orange. Orange is like the warmest color. Um, and then you have this purple here, which is shifted blue, which is a cool color. And so is this. This is shifted blue, which is a cool color. So it's a cooler version of neutral, a warmer version of neutral. So it creates a very subtle contrast in warmth. And that's the idea of the piece, is it creates warmth. And you can see there's green here actually, which is also a cool color, because he's showing inside these windows are actually very cool. He's also showing there's cooler colors along here. So this wall, or maybe the hidden parts under tables and maybe dropping back, there's like a coolness in the environment, a breeze, a gentleness that he's introducing with just this suggestion of a tree. And so he's suggesting there's a breeze, he's suggesting there's a tree, he's suggesting that the bottom end of this scene has less light, it has shadow, but he's not creating shadow with darkness, he's creating shadow with a change of color, with green, which is kind of amazing. And here he's creating shadows, but they're much cooler, much more alien, because they're purple. And yeah, there's splashes. You can see all these splashes of yellow, which is reflections of light that are coming from this central point. So as you can see, he's actually using quite a lot of understandings, a lot of deep understandings. Here's the horizon line. And how tall are we? We are not as tall as this waiter. Um, so presumably we're not sitting, but we're maybe just, maybe he's elevated a little bit, um, on a seat, so he's higher than this thing. Or maybe, as you can see, this is a raised platform. We're walking on the street and they're just elevated just that little bit. So everything's extremely consistent and is used to evoke, what it's meant to evoke. And you can see there's also pointing lines towards the focal point. Everything is drawing back here, which is the focal point. Even though it's not in the center, it's the focal point is this sort of waiter and the backdrop of this scene here, where there's a hustle and bustle. And you can see that these people, those people are only about the size of your focal point. So this is your focal point, and you can just tell that that's like, oh, there's a bunch of people there. Or you can change your focal point to over here and you can see that there's a bunch of people here. Or you can change your focal point up here and you can see a different thing. So what he's done is he's started to make it so your eye can like look at the lonely scene below you and you can be lonely. You can look to this busy scene and you can feel like you have company. And what's this little shadow guy doing? Who knows? Very suspicious. And then up here, you've got this cool uh, night's walk. And up here, you can look to the stars and you can wonder. And so this is about like you can be a dreamer, you can be obsessed, you can be with people, you can be on your way somewhere. And so it has many different components to it that you can appreciate, which is lovely. All right, Salvador Dali. I'm going to be honest. I don't pick Salvador Dali because I'm like, wow, I've studied this guy before. This is amazing. So I'm not going to have like an awesome backdrop understanding of this. So I'll just basically say a couple of rules here, which is look at this clock. This clock is perfectly well done. It's absolutely fine in how it's done right here. Um, the way that he's creating a reflection off the table, so that this little wood block is reflecting light onto the underside, and then it's got a darker underneath, and then it's got shadow, and you can see this light is probably taking light from the environment, which is hitting off against these rocks. It's obviously a sunset, so there's not a lot of light because there's probably some object up along here that's uh, extruding the light from the scene, but it is catching light from the environment, and especially this side, which is catching this light from here and reflecting it back into the eyes. So this is actually quite intelligently well done in how he's doing shadow and light. And even here with this shadow, right under this clock here, he is showing that it's not connected to the table. Here he's showing it's connected to the table. Here he's showing it's dropping off because this shadow is much softer. It's got softer edges. So when a shadow comes away from a form, it gets softer. Um, these transitions here are a soft blend as well, which is also showing a kind of understanding of shadow that this is, it's turning from a harsher shadow sort of within this area that we're in, and then it's sort of gradating out in a soft way, and then it gets much more light up here. Something we can also see is the use of composition of thirds. So this here is a third, and it's very bright and sunny and colorful. And then this is 2/3 here, which is less, which is darker and so on. And then you have these smaller components to the scene, which are sort of, this is small, they're small, smaller features. This is the medium feature, and this is the big feature. So the big feature is darkness, this absence. So obviously, this piece is about something dark, something internal. There is a stone here, something that represents solidity, like identity, maybe, stability. And draped across that is something strange. Like, we don't know what this is. It's weird. And time is resting on its back. So maybe this is something that's asleep. Um, or maybe just trying to rest, trying to get away from stuff. I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is. I think it was like a conch shell, which then just get drawn out. Or maybe it's a cloth, and maybe there was something in it, like it was a wrapper of food or something. Whatever it is, time hasn't done it justice. And we look over here, and this is a contrast between something very modern and something very natural. So the natural state of what you are, uh, when it's so close to something modern, is a weird hybrid mixture. And then there's the natural world. So you have this idea of nature versus what we deal with, who we think we are, what we believe we are. And we have like this branch, this natural branch, which is holding time over our head because time is natural and it does loom over us at all times. And as we can see back here, this is another unnatural figure, which is contrasting some kind of similarity to the ocean. So, our ocean is like, oh, we look at that metal sheet or that whatever, and that's what we see in the modern world rather than seeing the beauty of the ocean, which is so much prettier, so much nicer. And he has created a very evocative, nice set of lighting in this sunset. It's really quite pretty. But then you come along here and it's much more upsetting. So another part of this is also this perspective here. So this perspective isn't a one-point perspective where, okay, so this is our eye line. So technically, if we're a person in this scene, we're standing like this. And so this perspective of this box isn't quite right. Um, so it definitely suggests, first of all, that this is off to the left side of you. So you would be pushed off to this direction. So it's saying you're off, like maybe here or something, because otherwise you wouldn't see this kind of like distortion like this. It's it is a distorted perspective. It's not going to one simple vanishing point. It is elevated. This is almost ramping or taking off. This is like a jump that's taking off. So this isn't like just connected to the ground plane. That so it is somehow or other levitated in some degree, which creates a slightly unsettling feeling. Um, so if that's purposeful, and it probably is probably to create this feeling of time being separate from what you are experiencing and what nature is. So it's all very cool, and you can see the color composition here, like purple, yellow. That this is a yellow's neutral. Um, this is blue, which is cooler, and this has an orange, so that's warmer. So it's warm and cool, and it creates a nice little sandwich of warmth and cool, which is a nice experience. And then down here, it's much grayer, colder, and abstracted out. But you can also see a use of color and warmth in the darkness with this, which seems to be a different version of time, something like a more personal memento, something that's nice about time. Like, yeah, this is horrible. That's pretty bad. This is a little bit nicer. It's kind of like reminds me of my work day. It's like, yeah, it's slipping away, whatever. And then over here, this is just kind of nice. It's like, yeah, that's my own time. I like that. So there is an element of um, familiarity, niceness, warmth amidst this darker, dreary weirdness. And then there is loveliness out here. So it's kind of saying, to me, this just describes like how you feel at work, to be honest. So this feel like outside is amazing. Um, you're sitting in the office just going like, ah. And then here you think about your personal stuff and you're like, oh, that's really sweet. So there is a kind of beautiful balance here as to what's described, which, as abstract art goes, it's pushing and breaking boundaries. It's which sounds very cliche, like, oh, breaking boundaries. But quite here, he's literally breaking the expectation of this clock. He sets it up. he sets up the nature of a scene, and then he breaks the scene, which was otherwise realistic. This is incredibly abstract. The clocks aren't as abstract as this is. This is like the most abstract part of the piece. So you're like, oh, this perspective changes. That makes it more abstract. This feature in the background makes it more abstract. This combination or contrast between nature and time also makes it more abstract. So several different features push that abstractness, which is really interesting actually, like almost as a communication of how things can become abstract. Here you have something more kinetic. So I like to think of artists in different ways. So there's people that are very physical that use like their muscle structure to create like feelings that do something. Like just combining and dancing with the feeling of like your pen strokes. And you get sort of kinetic thinkers and artists that think and sense things that are going to do something more like a Jackson Pollock kind of thing. And they're going to create textures. And wonderful textures are super important in the refinement stage of art. So when you're refining the idea of a background, like this could be a perfect background, or you're refining the idea of a texture on something, like it might be like a cloth, or maybe this is going to be for graffiti or something, and you want to represent a kind of cool mood or a stylization that's going to make something pop. You can think about how these colors, or you can even use this to think about color complements, like the yellow and the blue and the red, and just sit there and think about how they contrast with each other while light and dark contrast in the background there. You can think about those things if you want. Figure out whatever you want to figure out about like stuff you want to take away from it. But I would say in the refinement phases of drawing, like at the end part of your method, you're going to add in textures that you're going to want to have. And sometimes a texture is better to be abstract rather than literal because it's going to express an emotion. And this is more of a kinetic emotion, which is much more funky. So you want a funkier stylistic tone, use a texture from something more abstract that has a funkier tone. So super useful, super interesting, and it's a nice painting. Okay, so here Richard Schmid. So Richard Schmid was uh, an artist I was put onto by a coach I had. So my progress was that I I learned things like stroke and form and so on for like 3 months. Um, and then I went and got coaching for about 3 months. And then I sort of faced what I would call like a demon in a box, like which is just facing a lot of tough questions and like how everyone like wants to stand over you and tell you like you must learn the way that I said whatever. And I faced that for maybe like 6 months. It took me a lot because it was like everything in my world was just imploding on me. Just every thought and understanding I had of art, there's just so much in my head all at once. I was just pulling my hair out. I just was like, oh my God, I can't handle this. And then ever since, like just a few extra months or something, I've been very flowy, very happy getting back into things again. Let's say 3 months or plus or something, and just had a very wonderful, lovely time doing art and so on. But hey, with Richard Schmidt, this guy was the guy that I really, really really loved his take on abstract and impressionism, expressionism. So this part over here is more expressionist. This part over here is impressionist, like Monet. So Monet has like that fuzziness, like at the edges, this kind of like soft edge kind of thing that he's creating. Um, and then it comes into steeper realism. So this is like Monet in a way, where it's drawing you to a focal point, which is about this big. And then there's like this secondary kind of focal point like this, and then everything else is kind of more abstracted. And it's a really wonderful way to combine and to really harmonize. This has so much incredible harmony in it, where he's using contrast of light and dark in order to make things pop. And you can see that this light section, this is about a third, and this contrasts up against this, which is darker, more chaotic. Ba, 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 ba. There's something explosive behind her. So you could view it like she has a secret. Like there is a secret veil, a cloak that this girl wears that hides her true identity. And in that identity, there is all this complexity, all this whatever. And then when maybe you look at her, it's contrasted or viewed as light. And maybe it's also viewed as just ordinary, normal, random stuff. And so there is this elevation done here in the abstract. There is chaos here, which helps represent more of the harmony that you see on this side. And so it's just a wonderful idea of you don't have to show what a background is. We can imagine what's in the background here. We can imagine, this is the ground plane, and, there's probably some light source coming from back here, and maybe this is the horizon line, or here, or whatever. It might be the back of the room, and maybe there's a hallway that's shining this light through. And then, this is whatever's close up, like furniture, whatever else. This here, what's this? Maybe there's a wall there, or maybe like you don't know what that is, but it's something. And then back here, you've got shadows from ceilings and stuff that is kind of closing in. So he's representing an environment, but he's doing it abstractly. And that's just a really wonderful way to draw. And I think of it like, say if I'm going to draw like, I don't know, let's just say stick figure person or whatever. And I'm thinking about, oh, how do I want to do my comic? Um, and you think, well, you can actually add abstract feelings into the background. And this is true of manga, where you might have someone going like, wow, and amazing, and it'll just use speed lines. So you're using abstract art to represent a feeling. Well, what did I do there? Doesn't matter. You're using that to represent a feeling. Like, wow, oh my God. Or maybe you're doing a speech bubble, and the speech bubble goes up, and then maybe it has like this jagged aspect to it because what they're talking about is very sharp. Like, that's creating an emotional mood. Um, or say you just have a figure and there's just a gradient, just like there's a darker gradient up the top, and then it gets lighter as it comes down, and you have a figure that has like darker eyes underneath, and they are like, worried about something because Now you're showing abstractly there's a darkness behind them. There's something they're considering or thinking about, and you've represented through abstract art the feeling or the emotion of the scene, so it doesn't depend as much on your cartoon face to describe the emotion. So just understanding abstract things like this and how it works to do things gives you more options to express emotion. There's other things where someone might literally take things from Vincent van Gogh or something like that, and they might be like, "Oh my God, I'm screaming!" Oh, and they're gonna have wiggly hands in like a moment or a scene uh, where they're like, "Ah!" They're gonna literally take from Vincent van Gogh, or they're going to take from more modern artists where they might have like this triangular shape in the background with like a dot and then like a, a squiggle or something, and then like a triangle shape to represent aggression. Oh, and then there's this thing, and then there's that thing that's doing this thing. And then it's like, I don't know, someone's like aggressive, like, "Arr, arr," and they're, I don't know, coming at you or something. Whoosh. So this is absolutely terrible, but you might use this abstract art to communicate an emotion in the scene that you otherwise might not easily access. So that's really cool. So after 6 months, I remember doing this one, this painting, which I was really proud of. So my abstract understanding wasn't amazing. It's just kind of like random. So it doesn't do as much as say like Richard Schmidt did, obviously. But what I did understand was this hair was an abstract piece. Uh, Comparing with the face, which was less abstract. Here there is controlled lines and differences between edges, and here there's a breaking of edges. There's a controlling of shadow and light. So the underplanes of like the eye are darker, and the underplane of the lips are darker. Underplane of the nose is darker. So, and this part that drops back in the cheek is darker. Also, there's a plane on the face that drops back to give it sort of three-dimensionality. Um, so that has an understanding of shadow and light. It also has an understanding of abstract comparing with the real, and like this hairband, this hair sort of just being fluttery or whatever. Like this for me was something that I was stressing about for ages. It only took me like 90 minutes or something. But leading up to this drawing, I'd never done a painting before. Um, uh, this had reference, but it wasn't the same as the reference. So I wasn't going to do it the same as the reference because the reference I had was someone else's copy of Richard Schmidt, and it wasn't even a really good copy of Richard Schmidt. But I kind of liked that because it was like two steps away from what he was doing, and then I was like thinking, well, how do I create a Richard Schmidt feeling? And I'm kind of strange in that I'll create random words for things that I want to uh, to understand in a abstract or very personalized way. Um, uh, so I'll just create the terms that I used to create this and how I understood the abstract. Um, okay, so Mir, I just think of that as like this sort of mysterious, like that happens at the edge of something. Like you want it to like drift off, something drift off the edge. And so I wanted this kind of like this mysterious little growly edge that came off things. was like, that's just so lovely. I love the way that Richard Schmid does that. So I was really paying attention to creating a kind of soft, loose edges, right? And then tepe. This is just about closure, probably the idea of closure, which is that you only need like a part and then a part and then a part to describe something. Like here, this is the big major part that describes her, and then there's a secondary form that shows a bit of shadow, and then there's a bit more form that's just rhythm. So it's slowly diminishing how much there is to describe what's happening. So there's the literal, there's form, and then there is just rhythm. So I'm not trying to describe everything on this face. Instead, I'm cutting it into like big, little, small. So you've got like the most literal, then the second most literal, then the third least literal. So this is tepe, which is just like, I don't know, tepid water or something. Like it's just a little bit of something and it slightly changes. Then there's pique, which is just little bits of highlight. Like what's a highlight? Like little bits of the lip, little bits of the eye, little bits of sheen, little bits of change in color. These little sparky parts to a person add interest. Like they pique your interest. And I'm just like, okay, so I want these soft, wavy edges. I want something that transitions into rhythm. I want something that then has a little bit of sparky aspects. And then I had a final idea, which was ima, which is just my word. And it's always good to have random words. It's enjoyable. I highly recommend it. Ima, which is just light contrasting with the dark. So it creates a pop, like a visceral contrast, like cha, wah, pacha. There's so much difference here. And this is creating that sort of that pop, that difference in color. So also this here is an ima to like this. But you can do that with color as well. So like just any contrast. I don't know why I don't use the word contrast. I just dislike the idea of having to carry every burden that I've ever had with like another wording or something. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I never studied David Rico's thing. I just saw this before the video, creating the video, and I was just like, oh, this is quite lovely. It's obviously very, like there's an obvious method to this. So something that I would say might be a mistake or a feature of modern artists is that they tend to do every single thing the same. So they want to do things with consistency, beauty, whatever. But what they'll tend to do is tend to create the same color, exact same color tone, even though these are in different scenes, different lighting situations, different whatever. It's the same. It's the same face. It's the same hairstyle. This drooping little flick of hair. It's always on the right hand side. Usually this white top, same bust size. You could say it's just, yeah, it's because it's the same or similar models. Okay, same wrist size. You could say just, that's just because they're female. This one's a little bit smaller of a person than this one. But look at this wonderful idea here of this underneath the table. That's fantastic. So nobody's going to look underneath a table and figure out what's happening underneath a table. So this dark patch with then like a nice solid frame and then dark patch is absolutely wonderful abstraction. You might think like that's the least important part of this piece. It's wonderful because it contrasts this dark element here with this light element up here, and these features are pointing towards her, and this is warm, this is cool, and it's creating a nice ambience. That this here is cooler, so it's pushing you into the warmth, and so that you're going to look here. So he's got a wonderful understanding of composition, a wonderful understanding of abstract art, a wonderful understanding of realism and really clean edges. It's wonderful. So he's used a method to get to that stage. He didn't just draw this in like 90 minutes. This is something that's taken, like I would be surprised if that took 4 hours. Like that, there's no way he did that in that short of a time. It's probably over a week or something like that that he's done this, and it could be longer. It could be shorter. It just depends on how good he is at the specific method that he's using, or how much like detail and time he puts into each and every little stroke. But it is really a wonderful example of modern art or modern artists where they're very capable of clean and abstract art. And so they will look at and study great artists of the past and represent that in a new, interesting way. For this, it's fantasy stuff. And, he's not pushing his compositions to create like something incredibly new, because this is a study. And he's doing it that way, but it's really quite beautiful. His capturing of color and light and all that sort of stuff. So it really is wonderful, as much as I am kind of poo-pooing on the having exactly the same figure. But it's great. Like, and you can see it looks wonderful. It looks a little bit doll like a little, like you've set something up in a dollhouse. Then we have Arcane. This is one of the most impressive cartoons that's ever been made, in my opinion. For one, because I kind of like the Fortiche sort of style, how it's kind of like this sort of French animation look to it, um, which is very stylized. You can always see like this stylization of like just these kind of like cut geometric shapes to help create like depth. And you've also got like this, like, look at this slope of the shoulders down like this. This isn't like anime where it's going to come directly across. This is sloping down to represent an emotion, obviously, but it's also a bit more of that sort of French style. Um, you've got like thirds cutting across here. You've also got this big um, and smaller element, and this is probably the horizon. So we're actually viewing from the same height as powder here, and so that helps us look up on Vi, and look on the features of her face. There is even a representation of perspective, that there is a curve happening in the features, because and there's less with powder here, and then it's going to change the features to having this kind of whip around like this underneath. So wonderful take of perspective and everything here. And you've got these rhythm lines leading you up across here. You've got this contrast point, which contrasts light and dark. And kind of a wonderful thing here is they've used lighting for the scene. This color of this skin is not the same as exactly this or this or this. They're using different colors. It's consistent, but depending on the scene, they're using color to transform the message of the scene. This is dark and red. This is clear and crisp, like a day, like it's just a beautiful example of day. This is night, but it's also a magical night, right? And this here is kind of like these tones of just like nobody cares. nobody cares about you is even represented in these tones. Like, this seems like some unimportant place, even though it's an important place in the plot or whatever, where this is actually a really cool place, but it seems like it's just like it seems like an office like thing. It's just not an important, like, you're not important here. Um, Feeling that comes from that. And you've got this abstract shape here on him as well, which is meant to be like an hourglass, which is his symbol because he can do things with time. But yeah, it's really stylish, really nice. You can see this very painterly approach to what they're doing to create this form, to create depth. And there's actually some really cool, silly stuff just looking at the eyes. So most people, what they would do is they're like, how do I create eyes? I've got to create the same eyes on both sides of the face and whatever. Here, no. There's something very special happening here. So you can see this one's like a trapezoid that kind of, it's got like a thing that comes up and then like it just sort of climbs over and through and down. And you've got, I don't know, it's mostly the upper part of the eye, right? I don't know. Just very loosely here. But if you see the central point of the eyelid, it's catching with the peak of the iris, the pupil here. And if you notice also at the bottom here, this is flat. Why would it be flat while this is going back? It's representing that this is the most forward point on the eye. So they're representing here peak, peak, and it's tracking this eye motion. And then when we go over here, look what happens. So they've changed the shape of this eye. This one comes more up, and then it comes like a whippy down motion, not that extreme. And then it comes from underneath, and then it sort of whips up or whatever, and like whatever. Okay, so the eye is tilted across the plane, that central plane. So I'm kind of exaggerating it here, but it is essentially not on the center part of the eye, and they're representing that in the shape. So the most forward part of the eye that is connected to the audience, this part here, it's showing that this is like, this is the center line, this is the center line of like the object, but this is coming off to the left. And so it is they're specifically changing where the peaks are on this eye because this is rotated around, which is super fascinating. This one's straight on. So we're kind of across this way more, we're over here more, because he's obviously looking over here. But also they've made it so that this is rather fleshy in that it's slipping back across here. And so the eye has, as it's come off the center point, it's come into a narrower aspect of the eye, which is really fascinating that they've even highlighted this by having like a sort of straighter, more geometric edge here. And this one is a more curved edge. So that's really interesting, just in the eyes. It's also to show squinting, so to show suspicion. Um, so they want to create an asymmetry where this one is, it's just a kind of accepting eye, but this one is like more squinted, more triangular. It's representing like, what are you talking about? While this one is like more accepting. So this guy is represented with his two eyes. One has the representation of like, yeah, sure, I believe you. And the other's like, what? I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So it's kind of cool like that. And here we see a similar thing. Um, this eye is more open and wondering, while this one's more closed and kind of like, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. And it creates an innocence because the contrast between this eye is really sort of open and easy and just taking things at face value. This one's like, but do I really understand it? And so they've represented what is a very complex emotional thing of naivety in a wonderful way just through those eyes, and also the tension here in the lips. That tension that they represent in her lips being nice and narrow is also showing that kind of her not being sure of herself as she observes the world. And so it's speaking a language just in those little subtleties as to how they're viewing the world. Here, she's obviously surprised. She didn't expect to end up falling. And she's also kind of accepting, like, even though she's surprised and in a bad spot, she's like, what? Oh, I guess this is me now. Here, also surprised. Guess this is me now, even though it's terrible. While these eyes are saying, like, no, this is bad. This is definitely bad. This shouldn't be happening. And I'm really sad about it. How come it came to this? So this is a more complex idea in this. So I just wanted to express a little bit about abstract art and just explain to you a little bit more about what it's about so that you can kind of understand and appreciate like different things when you look at things, different pieces of art, because it's going to be important in your journey. So, as I was describing earlier, I think I said, what did I say? I said like I had 3 months learning stroke, just like, well, it was like a couple of weeks learning stroke, and then like some form, and like just like playing tennis or whatever, you just kind of like use your muscles to kind of like do stuff. Wow. And measurement, measurement, measure, measure. So stroke and measurement, probably the best thing. Um, and form, if you want. But I didn't really, really focus on that in those first 3 months. But you can do that in the first 3 months and you can get actually really decent. So, for example, like doing this, this took me 6 months, but you can see I got accuracy here. So I can just look at something and I could just create the accuracy that I wanted. Like, oh, okay, so we've got this thing, and then it's like this level, and then this comes around like this thing, and then this goes like this thing, and then this goes like this thing, and you can see I'm just triangulating here, and this goes like this, which has a plane that comes to here, and then goes like this, and then we're whipping off with a nose that comes like this, and then like there's a curve aspect to it that comes back like this, and uh, drops down like this, and you've got this does this, and like within a framework of time, you can start triangulating what you're actually looking for here, and you're like, oh, okay, so the eye is gonna have like some dark patch here, and then maybe like pull back to here. I remember I did do like a T for like the eye when I did this, and then I'm like, oh, okay, and then the eye is gonna be like pulling, doing its thing or whatever, and this one is obscured, so we can only really show like a small portion of that. And then how do I showcase this thing? And I know this looks terrible, but this is information. So you have information, um, and as you add more information in more organized ways, things are going to look like much more like they should look. So I don't want to like do speed painting exercises or whatever. But you know, the moment you add more features, more information, it's going to start reading more like it should read. Like this adds three-dimensionality. So you've got a piece of information that says three-dimensionality. Let's add some three-dimensionality to the eyes. This is something called blocking in. So you'll see like painters or something like that. They'll block in like little bits of color or whatever um, to get the idea. Like this is like you could look at this and you'd be like, oh my god, what a horrible artist! You just the worst. Like this is so bad, man. Like, geez, can you just like stop? But the point is that as you sort of work something, um, uh, da, 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 da. This isn't great at all, but you can start to capture like a rhythm, like, oh, there's this rhythm that then curves, and then maybe this is interrupted by this curve, which is then interesting because it's got this S curve that comes around and down, and then there's kind of like this thing that comes around and through into like the lips, and the cheekbone is like still whatever, and this is kind of coming across, which then there's an eyebrow up the top that then comes off, and this part of the cheek isn't whatever, and what is this, up and down. And as you're studying something, as you're looking at it or feeling, like I wouldn't need a reference to do something like this these days. I could just think about rhythms, um, and sort of ways and features of like lips and stuff like that from things I've seen before. And you just slowly add in more and more of the useful details that make it less silly, less like, oh, this this isn't, this doesn't work. And as you slowly add in aspects, which is often why people draw from reference, because they're afraid of this phase. They're afraid of like, oh, if I don't have the information available to me, then I'm gonna like mess things up so bad, and then it's gonna look horrible forever. It's like, don't worry about that, because you add more information. It doesn't matter if it comes from reference or it comes from you. You add more information, it's slowly gonna like take shape, and you don't need to be so alarmed or alarmist about improving, because like I said, I did coaching for, what was it, 3 months. After 3 months of my own training, so the 3 months of my own training was to get myself up to speed just enough so that I was in a position to so that I was in a position to actually listen to the teacher and be able to follow along. Because there was no way I was going to be able to follow along initially, just like some derp, and they're like, do this, and you're like, I can't do anything. And then they're like, oh, well, just try. And that's not going to be helpful for me, right? Because I'm just in a stage where you're just being looked at as like, well, why'd you even come here? And you're like, meh. So by spending time and effort, I was then proving that I actually cared. or that I actually gave a damn about art. And so when I would come in um, to to learn, it it was more evident that you know I'd actually taken interest, or that I was interested in what I was doing or what was happening. And so then I wasn't like easier to teach, easier to teach. And I'm not saying like you have to like be easy to teach when it comes to like anything that you, if you're having struggle or whatever, you can be kind of like annoying to teach. It's not like a problem. But I just found that I was going to be better off if I um, if I was able to adapt to like whatever teacher was going to tell me or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, now I can adapt. Now I can listen to what you say. I can take on certain parts, and I don't have to take on everything literally, and I don't have to like treat myself as less than because I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I can be more equal. Um, but as I told you, there was eventually this demon in the box I had to wrestle with, which is how everyone tells you to learn their way. And there's they specifically have an art style that suits them, or they've created over their time, uh, their experience. They've got their burden, their issues, their they carry with them baggage. Like everyone has baggage and stuff that they carry, and it's just like if they're trying to impose upon you that their way is a perfect way, it leaves no room for an artist to be themselves, to be different. And I think it's super, super important with art, especially if you're trying to tell a story or something personally, that this other person doesn't know. Like they might be an artist, but they don't have your experiences in life. They don't have like an understanding of the things that you've done or you've gone through. So you can't just trust that their perspective of reality is going to help you get where you want to go. So you have to contest people to some degree, and it's not pleasant to do that because people will be like, you're contrasting against what I'm telling you have to do to get good. And for you to take a risk and say, well, I don't need you to tell me how to get good. How I get good is my own business. If I'm going to fail, that's my own business too. And it takes like a degree of, well, a very real degree of courage to kind of understand that, you know, you're never going to have a guarantee, and no person is going to give you a guarantee of success. So why why just linger with this idea that maybe you're not good enough, or maybe you're not going to get where you're going to get? Because just taking on that burden and saying like, oh, I'm not, maybe I am poor, maybe I do need to do things like everyone else is doing it, maybe I can't get away with what I'm trying to get away with, maybe the whole reason I'm doing this isn't strong enough, and I'm going to fail because I'm trying to take like this approach, and they're saying it's a shortcut, and that if I do it that way, I'm just going to remain terrible forever. Um, and you can like just yeah, it's not a good way to feel about yourself, is it? So I struggled with that demon in the box, that feeling, that struggle, for a long time, like 6 months, because it was a lot. It was a lot to take on, the idea that you and only you can design something that you really want to see. That all the responsibility, it falls on your shoulders. And just accepting that is like, oh my God. Accepting that is like, um, and yeah. So what I did in that time is I started to understand that it required a lot of fitness to be able to handle uh, the stresses and pains of confidence. So confidence isn't something that you get just because you can create something of quality. Confidence is only something you get that even without quality, you can make your argument, you can make your stand, you can say, hey, even though this isn't beautiful now, it's going to be beautiful because it's going to take me time to get there. It's going to take me a degree of thinking and feeling and just moving through things to kind of just get to that point. So, ugh. No, 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 no. I think when I was drawing this thing initially, I was like so scared because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to try and do it like Richard Schmidt. What if I fail? What if it's just terrible? Because I only had so much effort to budget into the attempt, and I was going to pour all of my effort for like that week because like I didn't have like the ability I have now where I can just constantly draw things. I didn't have that. I only had like a limited amount that I could put into things, and they're like, "Oh, you should be doing this other thing or you should be doing this." And I'm like, "No, I want to to try Richard Schmid." And they're like, "No, you can't do Richard Schmid. Richard Schmid is like amazing." And it's like, "No, I'm going to do it." And you're just being this obstinate firecracker of a person, just because you feel like that's what's going to progress you or make you different or better than you were the other day, and it's pushing you to be the kind of person you want to be or have the character you want to have as an artist, rather than doing things that will get you better, because there is no guarantee, and guarantees that are given to you are, they're like sweet little lies. Don't want to listen to sweet little lies about how you're going to get better better one day. Like, what you're going to do, you're going to listen to that forever? Have people tell you that, one day you just practice hard enough, long enough, you're going to get that. No, you're going to have to leap. You're going to have to jump. You're going to have to do things that scare the living crap out of other people, because they're like, what the hell did he just do? Why did he do that? That is insane. You want to be reckless enough that, all these people saying like, oh, you can never replicate the masters because I'm not saying I'm replicating a master, but I'm sure as hell going to try to be uh, as good as I possibly can be at my own style or at my own idea, because why not? If there is some hint of an idea of how I'm going to be better or how I could do something better, even if it takes risk or it takes difficulty, yeah, I'm going to do that. I don't care. The fact that I use whippy, silly lines that most people would call like chicken scratching, I don't care. I'll use that chicken scratching because I know that in the end, I want a style that is super, super fast and intense and has abstraction boiled in at every layer, because I like abstraction. I think it's wonderful. I think it can be really beautiful, and there's no reason to mm, ever reduce what you're doing because someone else doesn't like it or is like, oh, that's not the best way to do something. Like, oh, what do they know? So the demon in the box is that no expert is going to be able to tell you what they truly know, what they truly experience, and they're always going to like stand over top of you too. They're never going to allow you to rise up. Um, and it's not about like saying you're better than anyone. It doesn't matter about being better than anyone, or even being respectable to like random people who are like, oh, I actually kind of like, wow, you're a good artist. Like, maybe you just don't care about like what other people think. Maybe you care about like the imagination you had in your head, and this kind of like feeling of like, oh, I wanted this thing to have this feeling. Or maybe like when I draw a woman, I sense there is this energy behind them, this kind of mystery that I really love the feeling of. I love that smooth quality that lends them into the distance where they can just feel stuff and intuit the world, um, and just, yeah, that that cool stuff. Because like, so I'm not necessarily going to take a reference and then copy that reference exactly the same as what I see it as, because maybe I want to change something. Maybe I want to like adjust it, stylize it, make it different. And here I've made this different by just making it more cartoon, right? Um, don't know why. Obviously, I don't have as much time, and I don't want to like go through like actual painter brushes, like the gouache brush, because if I do that, it's like, oh, okay, now you're taking me through like a painting tutorial, and this is a drawing sort of tutorial. Um, and yeah, comes like this. And yeah, and so it doesn't look amazingly the same, but whatever. Sort of same idea, right? Um, so I would say, yeah, definitely, you could spend 3 months on your own, just like go as hard as you can, get strokes. Like tennis, you're gonna have to learn to use your muscles differently. Actually, let's go into some of the muscles. So you have your shoulder blade. It's along your back. This is your spine. This is your head, whatever. And you have like a clavicle, and like the shoulder connects in here, and like then there's going to be like a shoulder bone that comes down. Anyways, you have there's something on your shoulder blade, which is the spine of the shoulder blade, which separates a muscle that's here that attaches around and down into this part of the of your upper arm. And this is called your supraspinatus muscle. So if you're ever lifting like heavy bags at like shopping malls or whatever, like you've got your shopping or whatever, your deltoid actually can't lift your arm like this for this first part of the motion. Only after a certain point does this muscle come in. So you ever notice how that bottom part of the arc is really weak, and then this upper part is really strong? That's because the deltoids kick in. But the supraspinatus muscle, just on the top of the shoulder blade, is the one that actually pulls pulls you this part here, but it also does something else. It also rotates. It also rotates the arm. I think it rotates it the other way. No, it actually rotates it this way, I think. Yeah, and you've got something called the infraspinatus muscle, which is underneath. So infra is inferior, and supra is superior, so above and below. And your infraspinatus muscle, it rotates your arm this way. So it rotates it out that way. So it would bend your arm out this way, like, oh, thumbs up, bro. So what people don't understand about like the anatomy, let's say this is a chest, your pec cannot change where your arm is. Your pec cannot change pretty much anything about what your arm does, except that it like just moves it in, or it just moves it up a bit. That's all it can do. It cannot change your arm position. Your arm position is controlled by your rotator cuff muscles. There's another thing called a teres minor muscle, which is like this smaller muscle down here that kind of comes along like this. This also rotates the thing, but much more. So a teres minor muscle, if we have a chest or whatever, this is going to be like your elbow is going to come in. Like your elbows are really going to pinch in into your rib cage here. And that's because you're contracting this muscle, this teres minor muscle. There's also a teres major muscle, which connects to a different point. And they're innervated differently too. They have different nerves that go to them. But like, for example, if I have to create a horizontal line, I have to contract my teres minor muscle. So contracting my teres minor muscle gives me a lateral thing. If I don't contract my teres minor muscle, I've just got this thing, which is just a contraction of my supraspinatus muscle, this upper part, and infraspinatus muscle. Just and then if I lift my elbow, whoop, and so your elbow can be lifted by a heavier contraction of this supraspinatus muscle, then that gives me this angle. So I know that my supraspinatus muscle, super contracted, rolls my elbow over, which gives me these angles. You might think like there's a midpoint where you can just get in between, but there kind of is, but it's way harder to control. You can do it, but it's way harder to control that. It's probably better just to like be in this resting position or this edge position, and then sort of tilt your shoulders so that you get this, or this supraspinatus infraspinatus twist. You might just twist your arms, twist your elbows to get that angle. While if I'm going horizontally, I'm just going to contract my teres minor muscle to contract it across this way. So just understanding the muscle structure, although that's kind of fucking terrible, the muscle structure, there's one on the top, one on the bottom, and then there's like a littler one on the bottom. And littler one, that pulls your elbow in, but this other one rotates your arm out, this one rotates your arm over, and those rotations on the rotator cuff of your shoulder are actually what you're drawing with. This is where these lines come from. This star pattern comes from those muscles. So if you understand that, you can learn to transition. Like, I've got a supraspinatus muscle motion, and then I'm going to change to an infraspinatus muscle motion. And you can just look at what an infraspinatus motion is, and then you can say, like, what about a teres minor muscle motion? It's kind of like these squishy, squeezy things. So you can just understand that by shifting between the different muscles, and you can use your lats as well. So some people, they drop, like you can do this drop stroke, which is just using your lat muscles. Like you're just like, oh, it's heavy. you can create a very consistent downstroke like that. You can also tilt your shoulders and use a heavy motion and create like a very steady, smooth line using your lat muscles. But this is also just, you can just use your supraspinatus, infraspinatus to just to do the same thing. So like, what does that mean? So you've got different muscles that you're going to have to become familiar with that are going to be working in synchronization. And say, for example, doing this stroke of the face. What's this? This is just this is this motion. What's that? That's my infraspinatus muscle. While this would be my supraspinatus muscle to go in this direction. So I'm using a sort of tilting, flicking out motion to pull down this way. While on this side, like with this hair, I'm using a clockwise motion because I'm now, I'm pulling down, but I'm also whoosh this way. And at the top of this hair, I'm first using the supraspinatus muscle, supraspinatus, no, this is infraspinatus, supraspinatus. And so that transition, that smooth transition between the muscle that you're using is going to create flow and rhythm. So rhythm, just like dancing, you need to create rhythm in the stroke motions that you use. And you can just understand like form as well. Like if you're just understanding form is like the structure that you build things around. And you're just like, oh, that's the form of the thing. Like here we understand like the cheekbone and whatever has got this form. Like you can then break that down into subforms, like, oh, there's that thing that comes in there and whatever. And you can also break it down further to design, like this is 2/3, this is 1/3, this is, oh, this is a medium part, you know. So you can break things down however you like. Like you might think like, oh, I'm super, super, super messy. Oh my God. But the wonderful thing that I love about being the kind of artist that I am is that I don't have to judge myself or worry that I'll ever get to like a nice end goal. This was like my first accomplishment where I felt like, oh my God, I can actually be an artist. And the reason was I put it all on the line for that. Like I wasn't fit. I didn't have fitness like I have now. I didn't have a way to argue. I had like one sentence, one opportunity, and then I would be tired and tuck it out for the rest of the week. And I only had that one opportunity, and I'd worked up all my strength and my capability and my this and my that and my measurements capabilities, which would, you know, whatever, and my stroke capabilities or whatever. And I just had to like, I didn't understand all these things about like the muscle structures that I was actually using to do strokes. I was just guessing, and that guessing is just like, oh. I was stressed out. I was like, oh my God, can I do it? But when I did the painting, I was in a flow. I was in a flow and I was thinking about Mir and Tepe and Pique and Ima, which I think things I still think about sometimes if I want to like add abstraction and stuff. But yeah, it's uh it's just, there is a coolness to just being yourself. So never let anyone teach you to be something other than who you are. Just be you. Um, and artists should know that. They should know that. They shouldn't like step over top of you, but someone. Not even necessarily intentionally. It's just like this accidental thing of like I'm better or whatever. I'm not better than someone that comes up and does a squiggle, like the whatever. Let's do this. It's like, oh, I went to this thing, this art show, and there was like a model there, and they were doing this thing or whatever, and I don't know, like they've got like this special pose. I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter what the pose is. Like, I don't know. Let's see. this or whatever, like I don't know, some pose. And there's just probably a squish here or something because they're bending up, and maybe there's like a stretch over this side, and so they're like drawing a model and a figure or something, and like whereas I might look at the design idea and structure it back from form and just very loosely sketch and find uh, places where I'm gonna map whatever, they're gonna look at it and they're gonna um, think very specifically about what they're seeing and how to draw that thing, and um, they're gonna get super fixated on, I don't know, the let's have her arm back here doing something, I don't know. So it's from imagination, obviously, whatever. Let's just da da da. Maybe she has like a bun and like hair like flicks. Like that's actually pretty terrible. So, but say they come up and then they're like, oh, this, ah, this, ah, this is where the eye is. Oh, that is where the eye is. The mouth is there, right? And then, okay, the shoulder line. Oh no, and then the arm and the arm, and then they're like, but there's a leg, right? How do I draw a leg? Oh no. How do I? Oh, I think so. And then she's got breasts, and then they're just like, oh my god, my drawing was just so terrible. Well, that's only because of measurement. Like this is problematic because of measurement too. Which you can break down. Like I could have this, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I have the main idea, but it's it's going around like stray cats and dogs, right? It's like, oh my God, stray cats and dogs. Oh, so then you'll just start to like add like things that add like a bit of reference of like what the actual size or shape should be, using a bit of stroke to do it, maybe adding an understanding of like what the ratios should actually be with this. Like, what have I done wrong here? Like, where has it gone wrong? And you could ask questions to yourself. Like, this is a tilted pelvis, so the iliac crest would be somewhere here and this here, and usually there's a trapezoid that happens with the waist. And then a sort of triangle that triangulates down to like the bottom of the waist. So the form inside this would be kind of like that. So that would represent that, the belly would be there, not the chest. And so around here, you would have the starting of the rib cage, which, would come up quite a bit higher. So you can start fixing things by breaking down and deconstructing the form and understanding like that aspect of it. So I know the elbow always comes down to like the middle of the ribs. So you can just bring that out. And if it comes forward, it might extend a little bit longer because it's a little bit closer to you as a person. And so you can just take these little ideas and use rhythm or whatever, and you can get closer to an approximation of what like the figure was doing quicker. And that's not great. Like, look at how messy. That's the messiest thing ever. Whatever. I have evidence that I'm not always super messy. There's evidence. There's evidence. That is way too big of a head. Um, but if people are saying like they're trash because they can't measure, or they're not doing stroke lines, because this isn't doing stroke lines. This is just going like you're a printer. You're not a printer. Use strokes. Use strokes. You wouldn't um, swing a bat by just going, I push it forward. I swing it, push it forward at the little ball. Like, no, you're gonna sweep. You're gonna do something like more athletic. So do strokes. If you're gonna break things down to make sure they're like better structure, use forms, primary forms, secondary forms. If and um, if this is off and all your forms are off, just measure it. Like just be like, okay, what's the actual measurement here? It's like, what the hell? How do I measure this? I don't know. What is that measurement? Like you wouldn't come here and then say like, oh, it's an equilateral triangle. Oi, girl, equilateral triangle. It's come on, equilateral triangle, and then box. Yeah, that's it. That's 100% it. Because like doing that measurement isn't going to be like 100% it anyway. It's just it's just to give you an idea, like so that you start to understand what you're drawing, where it is. Like this eye is just literally halfway between this point and this point. So in this one, she has a smaller forehead than in this one. So that's interesting. You could pay attention to something like that. Oh, or maybe it's because I extended the chin. So I extended the chin a bit. So then maybe that does equal that. So, so you just want to understand that every single failure you make is within a context. It's always within a context. The failure that you're making is just because the measurement, you didn't do the measurement, and the force capability that you have is a bit lower than someone else's. Okay, fine. Or maybe your reference library of drawing something like this is less than someone else's. That's also going to make you a little bit less capable. Um, but it doesn't have to completely cripple you. You just have to say like, yeah, well, this dude, he's not doing stroke. This dude, he's also not measuring. This dude, he's also not using form. So, of course, this is actually a pretty good attempt. Like if I'm not using stroke and I'm trying to like create like a circle, I can use like my force maybe. Oh, mugga. I can use my force maybe to like do something. And sometimes you might actually want to use this style of drawing because it's going to give like an aesthetic, like a weird, weak, wiggly sort of style. That might be cool. Um, and you might just be using force, but then I'm using form. And like I'm just subconsciously using form to construct that. And so I'm not using stroke, but I'm using form. And I'm even using measurement because I'm like, how much is this side compared to this side compared to this side? And I'm using speed to like access this and this and this and this, while this person's just thinking of one thing at a time and just focusing on that. And if you just focus on that, you can just wander astray without even realizing it. You're like, oops, whoops, I didn't realize it. So you just want to learn that, everything in drawing requires that you just kind of have to apply those initial principles at least to get somewhere. And then later with designs, you have to focus on like abstract art. You have to focus on compositional ideas, and you have to decide what you're drawing so that you have a clear idea of what you're drawing, and then you can judge it versus what your design idea is. If you don't have a design idea, then it doesn't really matter. And when you're drawing from imagination, like I draw from imagination, which everyone told me not to do, by the way, don't draw from imagination. Look, it's meant to be hard. There's only a few people in the world that can draw from imagination. Don't you dare try it. I'm like, look, dude, doesn't matter if you want me to draw from imagination or not. I'm going to draw from imagination because my stories are in my imagination. If I can't draw my stories, then there's no point to me even learning drawing. I'm sorry, bro, but that is a hard, like, that's a hard rule for me. I'm going to draw from imagination. I don't care. I don't care how hard it is. I'm going to do it. So, people might be afraid that it's not going to look right. And because they're so afraid of that, don't be afraid of it. If you add like in the form and the measurement and you get enough force and enough fitness and enough whatever, it's going to turn out. You don't have to freak out. So when someone's saying like, "Oh, you're so much better than me at drawing," oh my God, it's just because they don't know the techniques. They haven't spent any time on those techniques. So of course, it's just like some simple techniques and ideas that allow you to become like better, like the stroke, the measurement, and so on. And those fundamentals, they take you like 90% of the way there. Like this isn't fucking masterful, but it's like 90% good enough to be like, that's all right. And it's even easier because I was copying to some degree this. So that's just super easy. If you have something to copy, like a reference, that just makes it even easier. So when people are saying like never draw from imagination, I'm just like, so always set a difficult game on easy mode. That's what you're saying. Always set it on easy mode? Nah, 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 nah. Get out of here. Get out of here with that. Do whatever you want. Um, it's your risk. You're taking a risk with your time, your effort, and how much effort you have to budget. As you get stronger, as you get stronger, you will be fitter and you will have way more of a budget to risk. You can risk. While someone else starting off, they've got a very small budget to risk. You've got like tons. So if you're not even taking risks here, like taking risks, like say the risk is going to take up like 90% of like your effort for the week, then when you're better, you're not going to risk 90%. You're going to be a little curmudgeon and like only risk like 10%, 10% of your week. It's like, come on. At that rate, like the amount you're risking is the amount like the noob is risking if they risk it all. Like if they risk it all, they're risking more than you. Like, what's the point of being an expert if you can't be brave here? You can't be brave and vulnerable and wild when you're learning and when you're starting off, then you're going to be a curmudgeon when you get better. And so being fitter is going to mean a lot less because you're not going to be able to leverage it to do anything. And your force, the same thing. Like if you're always using like your force to control like how accurate your circle is always used with some form of reference that you're drawing back to, then you cannot understand how force works in a vacuum. And sometimes you want to understand how force works in that vacuum so that you're not afraid of applying that force or speed. You can see all this weird, random, ugly stuff here. Sorry, there's an alarm that's telling me to stop. So you can see all this random stuff here everywhere. Doesn't matter. if you can see what you're drawing, if your eye sees it, you can carve away anything else. You can carve away the stone. I think it was Michelangelo who said, like, when I carve a statue, I just chisel away anything that isn't like the statue I want. It's just like, I just remove that part, I just remove that part, I just remove that part, because that's not part of the thing I see. So if you can mentally envision what you're trying to do, and then you can apply the different aspects, you can get much closer. And you're going to be very unfit. You're going to be so tired and so easily like tuck it out when you're starting. So even though you may know all these things about all these different stuff, doesn't mean you're going to just be able to apply it immediately. So then you're going to look at other people and you're going to say like, wow, that's wonderful. How did you do that? And it's just going to be like, well, there's like a mental body that you have that does get stronger, and it uses the fundamentals. So if you use the fundamentals, you're not going to be able to do what other people can do, like no, but you're going to be able to use those things in your limited way to do something that's within your budget to be able to do. And you can also risk your budget, but it's going to make you terrified. And that's up to you what you do with that. That's your choice. It's not theirs. It's no one else's choice but yours. And you can be Mr. like no skill, Mr. 6 months over here, and you can do something as well as this person does when they're not risking anything and they're just like blip. Like I'm way fitter now. This doesn't take me any energy. This took me a lot of energy. But that's because the difference in my mental attributes back then, because I had to fight the demon in the box, which is not fun. Like just constantly uh like it's like screaming in your mind that you're doing things wrong. You're just like, no. And you can't practice because it's just so like out there. And what I was working on in those 6 months, by the way, because I shouldn't say I was just like struggling, because I was working continuously on drawing, but a different part of drawing. So I used 3 months to get like some basics down. And I was capable. I wasn't this capable, but I was capable enough of like drawing something with enough charisma-ish stuff, but it wasn't that cool. But it was all right. It was all right. It was all right. And then another 3 months of like training with someone. That's something you should do once you feel like you've taken yourself to a reasonable limit where you go on, you get someone else to help you with like form and measurement and stuff, and just making sure those are on lock. Um, but then what I did is I spent 6 months on design, literally design, thinking about looking at and creating design. So what I did was I was writing, so I was writing a novel, and because like as a novelist, I'm much fitter and more capable of taking risks and redoing things and changing things and using things at speed and with good force because I'm a better writer, and I have better like mental fitness for that. So I would just use that to constantly design. I would paint with words rather than pen strokes because I would know, oh, I can create a form. Oh, I can create like a texture. Oh, I can create like a shadow. Oh, I can create a feeling or a rhythm or a mir, a tepe, a pique, and like in how I'm writing. I can do that. Yeah, no problems. So I would do that in writing and I would start to construct frames, shot compositions. So I would start to like, instead of just writing a scene, I would start to compose a scene and be like, what are the thirds in this scene? What is this aspect? Like, oh, this one's coming over here. So when I was writing, I was painting an image rather than just writing. And so I created an entire book in that 6 months, maybe more than an entire book. I think it was an entire book. Yeah, it was an entire book. It was 6 months, maybe like 300,000 words or something. And it was a really nice book. Really enjoyed that book. It's really cool. I'm going to create a comic on it. And yeah, I did that for 6 months before I then came back, and then 3 months plus, sort of just working on more things like fitness and panel compositions and stuff like that. Just working on bits and bobs that I need. All these different sort of little technical tweaks and things so that I can get prepared for doing all these like manga panels and like how do I do the business side of the production? How do I do the workhorsey stuff? What is the exact style that I'm going to create? Like, what's the design of like a villain's eyes? Like, oh, what's their villainous eyes going to look like? Am I gonna like create like this, which is like a shard, and then like this thing? Like, what is my villain's eyes gonna look like? What are my protagonists gonna look like? How am I gonna concept art design every single character I have in that book? And I have like this folder system that I'm constructing. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show videos of me actually doing concept art and structuring the design from like characters in the book, and then how I'm coming to decisions about like design choices, um, as to what I'm gonna do. Because like, okay, villainous eye, woo, woo, look at that. You have a rough idea of a villainous eye. Um, so everything requires you to think through it from the very smallest idea of texture, to background, to staging, to how you're even going to be doing your balloons and your text, like because it's going to change from the book, so I'm going to have to script it, rescript it, change it, alter it, all kinds of stuff. And I don't have infinite time because I work a full-time job as well, because I'm not a manga artist yet. I've literally only been doing it for a year and a bit, so I haven't even got a job in the industry. So so yeah. Um, But for me, what I want to do is I want to tell stories. So I'm good enough at storytelling that I should, and you'll see that in the future, that I should be able to make something compelling enough and beautiful enough and cool enough soon. Like maybe uh, early part of next year is probably when I'm going to start seriously. Obviously, I'm already doing design aspects now, but going to progress, and then hopefully we'll get to an actual manga uh, that will actually be really cool and an awesome story with awesome magic and fantasy elements and stuff. So, all right, cool, awesome, and I hope that helps you understand like the value of abstract thinking and abstract art uh, in your progress and your journey, and helps you understand a little bit more about the process and uh, yeah, what to worry about and what not to worry about too much. All right, take care.